Oh, look at that. Lisa's up and running. She's going.
Ready. It's been a long
She's saying
day.
it's darn near 6.
This one seems to be the one that's working. So.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, John. So let's move on to another large project, the facility plan project update. The good news is this is informational and no decisions have to be made today. So I know we're all tired, so that's good news. All right, let me make sure I can get this thing going. All right, for the first slide, I just wanted to point out so just to go back over the background and look at the timeline that we've come to at this point. So the real estate team began searching for a site in 2004, and in 2006, we chose this location in West Sacramento. And in 2009, we occupied the new headquarters. And then in 2014, we started to feel the pinch. So we had been in the building for about 5 years, and we're noticing that things were starting to get tight. So we had a formal assessment done by a professional workplace strategy group to come in and evaluate the space constraints that we had. And from that, we did an optimization effort in 2015-16. And that optimization effort gleaned 200 more seats in our current facility and kept us in the building through 2019. And then in 2016, the board directed us to establish a building fund of $181 million and gave us permission to spend $8 million of that $181 for the purpose of designing a building as a possible alternative for an expansion. There's 3 alternatives you asked us to investigate. One is the expansion of our current headquarters. One is long-term leasing in the marketplace. And the third one is to maybe find a building we could retrofit. It's meant to be a 30-year decision. And it's funny because when I look at this is a 15-year timeline. So we've been space planning for a long time. So again, in November, I'm going to be coming back to you with 3 alternatives to make a 30-year decision for us for the future of our space. You'll recall that after our optimization effort was completed in 2016, that we knew that we would be able to accommodate staff until 2019. And after that, we would need a temporary solution for about 168 employees based on our long-term timeline. So that's what we're going to start today. The conversation today about is actually just discussing what our short-term options would be. So CalSTR's investments office owns a parcel that's adjacent to our building that's been sitting vacant for 10 years. And so in thinking about what our alternatives are for a short-term solution, I began working with real estate and Fairfield, who is the asset manager of that parcel, to look into the feasibility of placing temporary office structures on that site. Now, there are some space constraints on that site. It's definitely built on a slope and would require a lot of site work to be able to really get the amount of square footage that we're looking for. I think what we could do is put 10,000 square feet on that parcel.
So you said Fairfield manages it for us?
Yes, they're the asset manager.
They mow it.
Okay, I was going to say, what is there to manage on a blank lot? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Okay, thanks.
So
Replace the fence after it's vandalized.
after it's been graffitied, yeah, that's the thing that they do.
Very modest.
So that particular site, based on the site constraints, may only glean us 100 a space for 10,000 square feet or 100 people. But it got us thinking because it's like, okay, that's a really great opportunity for us, and it might be a really good option in the fact that it's close to our current facility. Employees that would be working in that temporary location would have access to our parking garage, would have access to our cafe, and really limit the amount of time it would take to get back and forth to meetings. So it was something that we're really, really interested in, and we're expecting pricing back from Fairfield within the next few weeks. But in talking with the city, there's also other parcels in the nearby neighborhood that could be options for us as well, where landowners would be willing for us to do the same thing there, lease the space and put portables for us to expand that are walkable. And again, it's really just the disruption, limiting the disruption of staff. And so we really want to look into that opportunity to make sure that's something that might be feasible for us. And so that's one of the options that we're looking at.
And what type of infrastructure would the portable require?
Well, if it's the site next door, which is the site that we own, everything is already stubbed out. So electricity, water,
Sewer?
all of those things are already stubbed out. And then in working with, as far as the technology, I mean, definitely we could go wireless, that sort of thing. So, so there's a parcel here, there's a parcel on the other side of the building, as well as a couple of parcels that are about a block away that would be walkable for staff if that was a decision that was going to be made. And then, of course, the other alternative is just to lease space at a nearby facility. And so the pros of that is we could have more contiguous space. So I think that we would have more opportunity for growth if we needed, if staff grew at a quicker rate. There's some free parking at some of the locations, so some of the staff would get a perk if they had to move off-site. At least they would get free parking. But then, of course, the cons are it's not walkable to headquarters. We're not sure that the lease term will align with whatever our long-term decision is. And it would require some additional technology and administrative support services on that site. So if they weren't located nearby, we definitely would have to have some resources there, for sure. And of course, it would be more disruptive to operations. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at when we're looking at the pros and cons. So Mike DeRay and his consultants took me on a tour about a month ago to look at what the alternatives could be for us for the short term, looking for about 10,000 to 25,000 square feet. And so this is the market place that we actually looked at. So we're looking at downtown Sacramento, Midtown, West Sacramento, Natomas, South Natomas. All of them have opportunities for us. So that's the good news, is there's plenty of opportunities. Obviously, West Sacramento would be the best because it's closer, but there's definitely space available for us for the short term. And remember, this would be a short-term solution for us through 2021, because any long-term decision that the board decides to make in November is going to take about 18 months, 24 months to implement. So we're going to need that time established in the lease term. So we expect to make a decision on this in the next 2 or 3 months. And this wouldn't come back to you, to the board, unless the cost of a lease or a contract would exceed our delegated authority. So if it's more than $1 million, then we'd be bringing it back to you in that time frame for an approval of the contract or the lease. Do you have any questions on that?
I have one, but I've got people in line. Harry?
West Sacramento, $1.74 square foot. What type of building is that? How old is the building? What does it look like?
It's Class A space.
Class A is like, that's what you want? We want Class A?
Well, Class A is the highest, well, it's one of the highest levels of office space that you can get to.
High quality, modern.
High quality, yeah, definitely high quality. We weren't looking at any Class B, it was all Class A.
So, let's imagine we decide, okay, let's do another building because it's in the best interest of CalSTRS, our membership. Let's assume that, and that's an assumption, because I don't know if we're gonna do that. And then we're able to rent some of the space, because that's what's been, we would then be a landlord.
Correct.
And what would we be charging, estimated, for that type of space? Because it
More
would
than
be
that.
LEED certified.
More than what?
Will it be 25 cents more? Will it be 10 cents more? I mean, this is into the weeds a little bit, but I'd like to have some level of understanding of some of the numbers.
What's that?
I don't think we would be a landlord in that circumstance.
Okay?
No, he's talking about if we were to build and lease out to other people.
Yeah, we
in
built the
West
second
Sacramento.
tower. We only need 50% of the space. The
Okay.
rest of the space is rented out to another agency.
Right.
We become a landlord of choice in the Sacramento area. People say, wow, I really want to be in that building. It's a great place to be. We increase our presence in West Sacramento. Lots of jobs are created to build this new building, create some economic stimulation to this area. We're going to be here for a long term. We're serving teachers in the state of California. We're going to preserve our culture. We're going to keep people working together. At a time when the system's going through a lot of disruptions, we're going to at least have some certainty around physical space.
Correct.
Then what do we charge? What are we able to charge for that
So don't
space?
quote me on this.
No,
because
this
of
is
course
just
we haven't.
these are
but
estimates.
Probably 275 to 315.
Okay. Thanks.
That's more than the number.
And that's comparing us to probably the highest lease rate in the downtown market right now.
Yeah, no, I see those.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa.
So,
Okay.
welcome. Okay. Any other questions on short term?
Oh,
before
have
I
a
hand
couple-
it over to Giselle?
Hang, I think we do.
Okay.
Karen?
So this plan or these spots are for short-term
Yes,
and they're in existing buildings?
yes.
Okay.
Well, the portable option would be on existing parcels that don't have any structure on them right now. But as far as looking at the leasing market for short-term, they are existing buildings where we would lease a floor of an existing building and retrofit it for our needs for the short term.
So the five that you point out right here are those?
Well, they're not, those are just markets. They're not specific buildings because we haven't gotten that far yet. Basically, the first search was really just to find out whether or not there was availability and what we might have to pay for space that's out there. And so I think we want to look at the portable option first, and then we'll move to this option if that one doesn't work, because we think that the portable option is going to be a lot less expensive. Does that make sense? Sort of. Okay.
Lynn?
Oh, thank you. So this question is more about the planning process in general. And I don't know if this is the right time to ask this, but I'll ask and you can let me know. I'm just curious, so as the team goes through and looks at other options to buy existing buildings, how are you bringing that information forward to the board? So for example, 621 Capitol Mall just sold, and the sale price was about $20 million less than what we have budgeted for the cost of a new building. And it was Class A, beautiful building, built around the same time as this building. So how does that come forward to the board? And if you found a building like that, would you be able to bring it to us and before you go through all the design specs and give us a chance to talk about that?
Is that something you could help with, Mike?
Sure. Can I borrow this?
Sure.
Hi, Mike DeRay, Real Estate. With respect to looking at buildings that are for sale in the marketplace, we would have to work out an arrangement for the investment office to buy the building and see if that from an investment standpoint would be a good investment. And then if there was available space in said building, if it had available space to lease to the administration, if you will. So it would have to be kind of a unique situation that there was a building available in the market that had available space, and the fact that, you know, if we were going to buy the asset, it would have a good return for CalSTRS. It's possible because a number of buildings in the area are have available space in them or will have available space down the road. And in fact, the people that we have looking at the opportunities out there we've thought about that. Lisa and I have talked to them about that. And if those are very viable options, they'll bring them forward to us. And they would be brought forward to you for long-term options.
It's just that I thought that building had been on the market for a while, so I'm curious, did you actually look at that one?
We did not look at it for an investment option, and then that's just a choice from us and our advisor partners that we don't own Sacramento office space just because of our view of the opportunity set in the Sacramento office market.
So as you're going through the planning process, and I understand you're going to bring everything back to us in November, but, you know, these buildings come on the market and they're bought and sold, and they're not necessarily going to be available at the time that we are looking at everything else. So how does that actually play into the process then?
I guess over the next coming years, the investment teams that we have in place can look and talk to the brokerage community and see what is available or may be coming available in the marketplace. Often there are assets that aren't for sale, technically, like there's a shingle out front, so to speak, but the community knows that the owner would be interested in selling the asset if someone of our nature was interested in buying it.
Okay, I guess, and then the other question I had was, when will they report to the legislature on the proposed costs be delivered to them?
We're expecting that to happen in July.
And just for the record, I think the controller is still very concerned about moving forward with building another building and the optics when employers are having a hard time meeting the contribution rates and talking about a lot of other expenditures for the system. Thank you.
Yeah, then just, I heard you say before, it's sort of like a sequential comment. I think the way, given the tight timeframes of trying to get this packaged well for you, it is all a concurrent activity, not a sequential. So Mike's efforts are happening right alongside the design work with the $8 million that we had allocated initially. The design work actually will just start in about 2 weeks on the project, so we have to really run everything concurrently. Mike doing a market assessment and then Lisa and Giselle's team doing the initial design work. So in July, we will finish the analysis for the legislature, but also bring you back preliminary design work, both. But not a decision, but just so you know what's going on.
Okay, and then the board will also get a copy of that report as well, too? at the same
Correct.
time, Joe? Okay.
Definitely,
Thank you.
definitely.
Steve?
Yeah, and maybe just as a follow-up to that, so, and really to your comment, Jack, I just want to be certain on behalf of the board, certainly on behalf of the treasurer, that as we go forward on this, we're not foreclosing any opportunities that we might, or I should say, the design work isn't foreclosing any opportunities that might still be in the lease category, long-term lease category.
Correct.
That we're
No.
totally keeping those options open. So by
Absolutely.
the time we get to a decision as to whether we're going to build the building or lease or do something else, retrofitting or whatever it may be, we still have all our options open. That we, by entering into a lease, we haven't foreclosed the long-term possibility that we might want a longer-term lease.
Correct. And I did talk at the Client Advisory Committee yesterday, and one of the things that I did reiterate is no decisions have been made, and actually, all of these options are going to come back to you in November to make a final decision. And the way I explained it is the money that you provided us to go out and design a possible expansion is only for comparison purposes. So really, we're bringing you back what it would look like to build a building, to expand in our current headquarters, and then also what it would look like to lease, and if there's any opportunities to buy a building and retrofit for our needs over a 30-year period. And so that's really what the purpose, in my mind, that was the purpose of what you provided us as far as the $8 million to do. It was really for the sole purpose of us coming back with cost comparisons for all three alternatives. So that's the way I explained it to our
That's wonderful, Lisa, because that's
stakeholders.
exactly the way I think, at least as, I was here for that meeting.
Yes.
When we gave you that direction.
Yeah.
And so I think you heard us,
We're still talking about it.
you heard it just right. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
No, exactly, and that's, that's how we're looking at it, is that we've got to bring back the facts, and so we've got to do the analysis, and that analysis is really gonna start to happen in the next 6 to 7 months. We have a lot of work ahead of us to go out and really assess the market, and then to start to work with the design team to figure out what we want our building to look like if we were to go forward with that decision for 30 years. So it's a 30-year decision, and so there's a lot of work that needs to happen as far as getting that information together.
Paul?
Mike, you said something that I didn't quite understand, and so you said if we were to buy a building for our own occupancy, that would have to be considered an investment and meet the criteria that would be applied for us to do a real estate investment?
Okay, so to be clear, we haven't been asked to go out and look for the opportunity to purchase a building for occupancy purposes. But if we were asked to look at that option, obviously I would sit down with Chris and lay out the criteria for how we would go about doing that. And what I'm saying is, if that was to be looked at as an opportunity, then we would do the same thing we always do with respect to purchasing a real estate asset and make sure it fit those criteria from a return standpoint. And it would also have to have available space that would meet the criteria, for what the administration team needs for space availability, access to or closeness to the current facility as well. It would be you have to be a unique situation, but those unique situations sometimes get addressed. I would say when opportunities come in the marketplace, both Lisa's team and the real estate team gets phone calls from folks about availability of assets in the marketplace. So we are very well aware of assets that come to us, and they get the call directly, and sometimes we get the call directly of assets that are for sale in the marketplace. At this time, we're not looking at those as long-term options to purchase the buildings.
That seems to me that should be one of the possibilities. I mean, if there's a building that becomes available that meets our needs, maybe not perfectly, but maybe at a good price, maybe that's something we should do. And I guess I'm wondering, number one, it sounded like you were saying that we're precluded from doing that. That while we we can build our own building, we can't buy a building for our own use. Is there anything that prevents us from solving this space problem by, legally, really? I mean, from just buying a building, if the right building came on the market?
Paul, what I would say is it's complicated from the standpoint of how we work with the state of California, and maybe it would be better for us to come back to you and kind of lay out how that would have to work out. But you know, when we built this building, we did it in a different way, as in it was built by the investment office as an investment, and the way it was laid out, that the second building would be built through the administration team, and there's a lot of detail behind that. We worked with the legal teams to how that was laid out. If we're looking for the investment office to buy an asset, then lease space back to the administration office, we would have to just go back to both the legal team and just understand what those issues are, kind of relook at those and see if it's viable. But what I'm trying to say is if we were to look at something like that, we would do it from the standpoint of what we're trying to do from the investment office and try to get the appropriate return as an investment, and also make sure that it fits the needs of the administration team. Okay.
It seems to me we have one purpose here. We're not trying to occupy space so we can provide a return to your investment, to your real estate investment operation. We're occupying space because we need to occupy space. And to say that we're having to meet the needs of your investment objectives and our space objectives is working in opposition to each other. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying this makes no sense from sort of a legal standpoint. I mean, if we need to acquire office space, why can't we acquire office space with the singular purpose of trying to do the best job of acquiring office space for CalSTRS?
Then maybe it wouldn't
Acquiring,
be,
building, leasing, whatever.
then maybe it wouldn't be the investment office that would buy the building.
That's fine.
Then that's fine, so, yeah.
I mean, if we're asking our investment team, our investment team purchase things to get a profit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess that you're getting right to the point. Why, I mean, other than Mike giving us some expertise, why does the transaction involve our investment team?
Well, the nuance you just added to that is something we should look at. Mike is properly reflecting a lot of legal and accounting issues that we went through on transitioning this building that was very complicated for all of us to understand at the time. And he's trying to keep, I think, the demarcation consistent with that, right?
Yes.
And so I respect that. But I think that might be an approach you said. I mean, I think our external solution has been primarily focused on finding an office building that we would lease somewhere, not actually buy an entire whole new structure and get ownership of that. That's a much taller ask for us for a leases group to manage. That has its own risks that we hadn't considered, but we can certainly try that out as an idea.
Paul, you have anything else? Karen?
I don't know if this is the right time to ask it or not, but you mentioned, Lisa, the client advisory committee meeting and how you talked to at that meeting and what you laid out. What was the feeling? What were the comments? What was the reaction?
Well, we actually have a slide later that Grant's going to come up and talk to about stakeholder engagement. And so I think the reaction is that they want to hear more from us. They want to know several different things. They want to know the reason for our growth. They want to know how our growth correlates with membership growth. So they've asked some really, really good questions, and so I think what we're trying to do is to begin to really answer their questions and bring them along. I think what I heard from the meeting yesterday is the information I provided was very helpful, and they like us to put it in some sort of bulleted fashion so that they can then begin to share it with our membership as to what's been decided. I think there's some confusion about what's been decided and what hasn't been. I think one of the things I heard is that since the board, directed us to hire a design team, a decision's been made. And so I was trying to dispel some of the myths that are out there. And I think that more of that is necessary. And I think that they did appreciate the fact that some of the things that they were worried about are things that were still in development. It needs to financially make sense. And so that's what we're doing, is we're going out to see what makes financial sense for us to have a long-term plan for the next 30 years. And so I think the reaction was good. I think we need to do more of it. I think that's what I heard from them, is that they want to hear more from us.
Is this a usual thing on your client advisory
I've never
agenda?
spoken at the client advisory committee before, but they've asked me to continue to come through this process to be as transparent as we can about the process in which we're gathering information for you to make a long-term decision in the end. So I do think it was helpful.
Lynn?
Thank you. Just to go back to the topic, Paul's question, I guess the reason why I'm confused is that I thought that in all the board agenda items, that option to buy a building and retrofit it has always been an option, but now it sounds like it's not, because nobody's really looking at that. Is it an option, or is it not an option?
Yeah, it is definitely an option that we have down as something to pursue if such option came to be. I think that the challenge is that I would always look to Mike. If administrative services or the administration was to buy a building, we definitely wouldn't do that without Mike's advice, of course, because they do that for a living. So I think that we would engage with them on anything that would come up in the marketplace. I think that it's an option that we're going to look at. And again, like I said, we just started to begin to look at the options out there. So to your point, maybe there's something that's been on the market that we've missed, like your question about the one that was just on the market, 621.
300 cap.
Just down the street, yeah. So, I think to answer the question, quite honestly, is I think that we're starting to begin that process of looking at what our options are. And so I've just engaged Mike probably in the last month to start looking into some of those things. So it sounds like there could be some challenges as far as, whether or not the legality, and I would leave that up to our general counsel as to what our options are really going to be in that arena. And then we'll move forward with any discovery that we make within the next, 7 to 9 months. So to answer your question, I really think it's just because things have been happening so quickly, and I'm starting just to get engaged. November was when we gave you your last update, and this really is the time that we're really starting to dig in to look at what our alternatives are. So you bring up a very good questions today, and I think that we'll take those back with Mike, and we'll start to think about what the options are in the marketplace. And as buildings come up for sale, we can talk about it and talk about what our options are as far as engaging in that opportunity.
Okay, and as part of that, are you going to engage a local commercial broker to start identifying those and start talking to somebody like that?
Yes.
Because I know you have a leasing agent, but I don't know if they actually know on the other side.
Through our existing relationships, we both have an advisor that works for us, and they work with a local broker that has full knowledge of what's available in the marketplace.
Thank you.
I think that since we're on this topic, I'm going to skip ahead and, sorry, Giselle.
I still have questions.
You still have questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a question on that. Can we just stop? I want to go back to the purchase. So remember, when we do an analysis, it will include all of our operating costs and any improvement costs. So although the purchase price of that building might have been lower, it may not account for what our long-term operating costs might be in that situation. So we'd really want to do a thorough analysis of that alternative compared to leasing, compared to building our own building.
And I would agree with that. I would just hope that somebody actually looks at that.
Definitely.
Sharon?
One of the things, I guess, in this conversation on the board, and I know different constituents have different opinions about this issue. I think that we've talked about buildings and buying buildings, and I know this is another project that we've been talking about for, a year or some change, longer than that. I mean, literally, we talked about it before I got on the board with the first building. And the one thing that we didn't really, the word we haven't been talking about is culture, and that's something that's something I think a lot about in terms of long-term. When you talk about 30 years, I think about how people feel when they walk in this building, whether you're a CalSTRS staff person or a consultant visiting or a random person. I think a lot about that just in places I work, like my district, and how I don't always like walking into our building because of how it feels, or that we are kind of siloed out. And so I think I appreciate the taking the time to look at all of our options. I think, honestly, my biggest concern with our long-term planning and with this building, and I guess I wanted to say I lend support for us building a second building here. And that's because, we spent so much time talking about how we're global leaders, and our investment staff are global leaders, Jack, and all the work that he does. And I think my concern, and again, I'm open to having the conversation, so that's what we're going to be doing in the next few months. I'm concerned if, investment staff end up even 5 blocks down the street, that's 5 blocks down the street. That's not walking across a bridge or whatever it is that we will have to connect the 2 buildings to be able to meet and collaborate and work together. And so I think those are my biggest concerns are around the impact on our culture, because I think there's changes afoot, there's people retiring, there's all sorts of dynamics changing around us. And I'm very sensitive to the fact that, teachers, I teach at City College where, I have an office that's a closet, and I'm very, very aware of how teachers, their work environments, and it's different than this work environment. So I get that. But this isn't a school, this is CalSTRS, this is a pension fund. And we're professionals who manage money and benefits. And so I feel a bit, sort of protective of that culture, I guess, and feel like I'm open to lots of these conversations. I guess I'm concerned that if we end up, even in the leasing time, which we have to do anyway, because it's just the way it is with the time frame that we have, just the impact that has on our culture. Because I think when we talked about on our first day, the educational item about what are our kind of intangibles, what sort of what stands out with CalSTRS as opposed to even across the river and other pension funds, it's our culture. We're lifelong learners. All of our staff are growing and developing, and I think we have a lot of integrity, and we have sort of a moral record, I think, of how we conduct ourselves. And so I think I feel a bit protective of that reputation. Not saying that it can happen if we're in 2 separate buildings far away. I think there are so many things that I've heard Chris even express, an interest in wanting to, stay together as much as possible. I think the investment staff feel that way, which I think is great. And I talked with the Ontario guys because I know that they have a separate model where they do have like a separate investment world separate to the benefits. And I think there's pros and cons to that. So I guess I just wanted to lend support, that I just wanted to go on record as supporting it. And I'm very aware of all the different opinions and dynamics. But I also think it's important to say that this is, we are who we are here, and that's different than a school district. And it's also, I think, also unique in terms of who we are. And I think having our team, our membership is growing, which is interesting to me. And I also think the fact that we're doing more internal management, our staff are growing. And I would hope the community and I hope our constituents could support that, and we can figure out a way to get there. So
I appreciate your comments, and I think that the decision that's made in November, the board's going to have to decide whether it's purely financial or if these other kinds of factors are going to weigh into the decision-making process. Because at this point, we don't know what we're going to bring back to you, because we're still working out the logistics and we haven't gotten the numbers or the financial analysis back yet. But that will be a decision that you'll have to decide come November.
6:20, right? And I'm really kind of grumpy.
I know.
So, I think, and I thank Lynn for throwing that out there. I think it's rent, build, or buy.
Right.
Right? Those are the options, rent, build, or buy. So, and then within that, there's the risk, there's the political risk, there's the optics risk, there's the unfunded liabilities, increased costs, there's the argument, whom a lot of my friends remind me of the conditions that teachers are working in, and friends can sometimes disagree. Mm-hmm. It's really, they're 2 different real issues from my perspective. And my teacher friends can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're teaching in Modesto without air conditioning, and whether or not counselors should rent, buy, or build, I have a difficult, we just maybe disagree. And they can scold me and tell me, you're wrong, Harry. You need to go teach in Modesto in a room without air conditioning. And I get that. But I think that the nuance of rent, buy, or build is, you can buy a building at, 30% discount 2 blocks away. Right? That's a different conversation than if you're paying full value and you're 2 miles away. So it's more nuanced. And I'm not as smart as Mike and his real estate team to figure that out. But I think the 3 questions for us long-term, and then there's the culture, and if it's a smidge above, the math doesn't, it's a smidge, and there's political, optical issues we have to manage. It's a smidge financially, but you preserve culture. Maybe some of us are willing to take that risk. Maybe others won't. But if it's a real wide gap economically, I think that becomes very, very difficult to justify.
Sure.
In this climate, or in any climate.
Correct. Yeah, I understand. So do we want Giselle to go through what's been done from a long-term perspective?
I just, thank you. Just one question. If we're doing this, and I agree with Harry, lease, build, or buy. But if we're doing build or buy, are we doing the analysis on are we looking at it from the standpoint of being able to finance that with tax-exempt bonds? Have we considered that? Because
I think that came up.
We are a governmental agency, and therefore I would expect that we would have the authority to issue tax-exempt bonds and therefore reduce our cost of capital significantly to finance either the acquisition or the construction of a building. So I'm hoping that we're looking at that, investigating whether that is in fact possible. I have no reason to think it isn't possible, but that we should look at that, hopefully.
I will instruct our advisory group to look into that.
That's what I had thought. We had done some research.
So I think that my comments actually go to Giselle, and I'm hoping this is kind of a bridge. What you were talking about, if we're buying a building, that's not the cost of the building, it's the building improvements and all that kind of stuff. So when we do the analysis of if we're going to build our own building, we know we have to lease space. We're going to take into account what kind of income we would get from that would offset the cost of the building also, right? All right. Giselle, you're on.
You go.
I'm gonna go back.
You go back.
All right. So we've talked about this a little bit already. We've been jumping around. But that initial market look that we took for short-term space also gave us a little bit of a refresh on what the vacancy rates are around the area. And Mike and his team will be helping us dive deeper into whether or not there's something available for us that'll work in the range of 100,000 to 200,000 square feet, and if there's any of those special purchases available. So that is one piece that will be happening. At the same time, to continue our due diligence, the facilities team is working on that expansion alternative. And we've been working with our construction management partners, Ridge, Capital, and Stoke. We've just finished an owner's project requirements document, and that's really helped us define our expectations. And then we've also worked with Stoke to develop a basis of design. And that basis of design is a response to those owner's project requirements. It really helps us establish what some preliminary solutions are and refine the path that we'll be on over the next few months so that we're being as effective as possible when we go forward with our design process. That's a unique pre-design process that we're using this time, and it's so far very successful. We've also just received our bids for general contractor and architecture firms, and we're very pleased with the selection that we received. It's a very competitive group of bids, and we're confident that we'll have that selection done by the end of the month. And we'll be moving into our preliminary design phase to continue our vetting process.
Okay, so back to this. So basically, you know, as the alternative for expansion, if we were to decide to expand our headquarters in our current location, establishing a pipeline of potential third-party interest is vital. So we need that leasing revenue in order to make that a viable option. And so we're looking at certain things to explore. Of course, we're working with a City of West Sacramento and the City of Sacramento Economic Development Departments to determine if there's any interest from outside entities that are looking to come into the area that meet our, not only our timeline, but perhaps the square footage that we have available. Also, we're working with the state of California. I know that there's two big state of California building projects going up right now that have, you know, certain state agencies moving into them, but are there any state agencies out there that might be in lease facilities whose lease might be expiring that need that kind of square footage? So definitely working with our partners and with the state of California. And then also working with Mike and the broker community to look at the expiration dates of leases in the downtown area. So are there any private entities that are in the downtown area that are in lease space right now who may be expiring around that time frame that also meet the criteria of what we may have available for them? So that's what we're doing from that front. Of course, that's something I'm going to be working on really diligently. Luckily, Giselle and I we can divide and conquer because there's a lot to do in the next 6 or 7 months. And so this is something that I'm definitely going to be working on pretty hard in the next 7 months to make sure that we have something like that lined up. Of course, without any decision, we can't sign a lease with anyone, but to have a pipeline of interest, I think is very important. So that's what we'll be working on.
Just so I better understand a little bit of the numbers that are involved here, we would need 100, how much square feet footage would we need to meet our needs?
So what we figure is we'll need 50,000 square feet day one.
Day one.
Day one.
Right?
And we would have a
ballpark of what the square footage is. So you're talking about $1.2 million to $1.8 million in rent per
Correct.
year. Okay, that's what we would be paying day one.
Right.
Okay. If we were to become a landlord and we could rent at that, how much space we could rent up to 100,000 square feet?
For the first 10 years
For
and
the first
50,000
10
square feet for 5.
Too fast. 100,000 square feet.
For the first 10 years.
Right, at the number you talked about. So that's, we could generate whatever the number is on an annual basis, income coming in over a 10-year period with some inflationary stuff built into it.
Correct.
And I'm sure you guys know what those numbers are.
Not off the top of my head.
No, but down the road, that kind of stuff
Definitely.
will be brought to us.
That'll be part of the financial analysis.
Thanks.
Definitely.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so this like gives you an overview of the 3 separate efforts that we've got running parallel to each other. So we're continuing with that short-term alternative, and we hope to have that decided on in the next couple months. And then we would work to activate that space by July of 2019. We're also continuing to explore that acquisition alternative, and we're working through our expansion alternative. And by July, when the next time we come back to you, we'll be about 2/3 of the way through our long-term alternative discovery. Our plan for our final information to you will be to complete a net present value analysis or an NPV analysis similar to the one we presented in 2016 on a 30-year horizon. We'll be looking at those leasing or purchasing alternatives with the additional costs. So those occupancy costs, those ongoing operational costs, and that compared to the budget that we've developed from our conceptual design and our reassessment of any incoming lease revenue. So in July, we plan on presenting to you those initial conceptual documents and any findings that we have from that market analysis. And then we want to present as well the shell, or basically our format of that analysis, so that we're all comfortable with the analysis we're going to present in November. And in November, we will be coming back with the final information.
Go ahead. Well, grant's coming up. I do have a question, and it might seem like it's off track, But, so Jack, when we have our counselors that are going out to hinterlands, so like when we have workshops in Siskiyou County, we cover, we have the liability for the travel, correct? We cover them on their travel? So I'm thinking that if, one of the things that we might want to include in our analysis, if we end up being somewhere else and we have to have employees travel frequently between buildings, what the cost of the liability of that would be, please. Thank you. Go ahead, Grant.
All right, this is the last slide. I know Harry's getting cranky. And I have cut my notes way down. So Lisa was right. I think her presentation in CAC yesterday was very much appreciated. And that may have been her first time at CAC, but she and Giselle have actually gone out and met with stakeholders with me for the last year. So they do a good job of explaining where we're at. And Harry's covered a lot of it, but I just thought I wanted to really make sure that you hear what we're hearing from stakeholders, because I think that's important. And I would say that the concerns and questions really do fall into three buckets, and I think you pretty much got it, Harry. But to me, it's, does our recent and projected growth justify the need for additional space? The second one is the growth justified? And the third is really several categories of the optics. And I would say, if I were Graham Finley, green, yellow, red, in that order. So does the growth justify the need? We've done, when we've talked to stakeholders, we've used a couple of the charts that Lisa showed in November that show what the optimization work has done in terms of creating 15% more? 20 more percent, or 20% more space than the building was originally designed for. And the charts that show year over year, how much growth are we going to have and when are we going to run out of space? And so that one, I think we're getting the message out and people are really seeing that. But then the second one is the growth justified? We get questions about, have we looked for ways to work more efficiently so we don't need as many people? And what benefits are the members going to see? And that's something I think we're going to need to explain. And when I was listening to the investment presentation yesterday, I thought, well, there it is. You know, you bring the investment staff in-house, it's more efficient, and we save a lot of money for the system. I mean, and I think there's other examples too, and I think the growth doesn't necessarily match membership, and that's something Lisa mentioned, or questions we've gotten. Benefits and services is not the biggest growth driver in the last few years. It's really investments, compliance, everything we do for
Information security.
Information security.
I think that was a big one. You know, cybersecurity is one of the biggest risks to financial institutions today. And even though it's not outwardly touching the member, it definitely is protecting their fund. So I think that those are the kinds of messages that we're trying to make sure that they understand. You know, and I looked at our growth for the last 8 years to determine really where the growth came from. And it really is a lot about, you know, auditing, compliance, information security, and really investments based on the complexity of the portfolio.
Don't sell information security short of how close it touches our members, because if we really got hacked and all that information was out there to be sold, I mean, that gets pretty close, so. All right.
Okay, and then just the third bucket of concerns are really the optics, and Harry touched on a couple. School facilities, not all schools are able to expand to meet their needs, and teachers in general don't work in Class A spaces. And then the other side of the optics is something you've touched on, is everything from our funded status to contributions going up for state, for 2 at 62 members even, for the employers. And then kind of the constant barrage we get of articles talking about pension funding, contributions crowding out other services. And on the CalSTRS side, in recent budget hearings at the Capitol, we'll talk about this more in our legislative update, the issue of our funding plan and whether there needs to be adjustments for employers has come up. So I think that it all kind of swirls around with the idea of spending on space. And then in terms of what we're going to do going forward, I think Lisa's agreed, probably Giselle too, to make presentations every time we come before the board on some issue related to space planning. We're going to make a presentation at the Client Advisory Committee. And it's definitely now something that we add to every pre-board briefing that we do with stakeholders, so.
Harry?
I think, thanks, Grant, for that. That was very helpful. And yesterday morning, we talked about the realm of the possible in our first, I think, panel discussion. And I don't think the realm of possible is being able to compensate our folks the way Canada does. But as we, as an investment committee and as a board and as an organization begin to think about, do we bring more assets in-house in the private asset classes, talking with Chris and his teams, is understanding, will we be bringing in more people? And if we're bringing in more people, and can we generate the same type of returns, reducing the fees? It's kind of what we talked about yesterday, but will we have more bodies in here to do some more of that work? If I were to venture to guess, I would say down the road, the direction that this organization is going is the answer will be yes. I think we're starting to think about how do we execute those types of initiatives. And those dollars start to pencil out to really big numbers fast in terms of savings for the organization, which would easily offset the cost of a building. I think the biggest, like you said, the green, yellow, red, the red is the optics around it, because once you start, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
No, and to your point, I think the example of one investment yesterday, it was private equity, but if they had done it externally, it would have cost 160 million more in fees than by doing it internally. And that was like 1 year of fees, so.
And that was actually brought up by one of the stakeholder groups in the meeting at the CAC. They acknowledged that that could really be a turning point for us as far as the savings that it could bring to the system. But at the same time, you have to house those people. And these are people that could work anywhere in the world. So we, to your point, as far as retaining our culture is important.
And really what we're hearing from our stakeholders that interact with us the most is we need to do a better job telling the story and get them the information that they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All righty. Is that it? Karen?
I just have one more thing.
Go ahead.
When we have our board meetings, it's here. When we have our offsites, it's somewhere else. When you have the board meetings here, then you have the CAC, those client advisory committees here. Do you have those committee meetings at any other time?
I don't think, I've only been here a year. I don't think historically we have. There's probably lots of moving parts and pieces. We also try and keep the offsites to less business items. It's more.
In general.
Yeah.
In general?
Yeah.
Because I was thinking that we're gonna meet in July. We're not meeting in August. We're having the offsite in September, not meeting in October, and then we meet in November. So from July until November, our stakeholders don't really have a time to do the client advisory committee meeting. So
I've
I'm
thought of
just.
that too, and I've thought maybe there's no reason that we couldn't hold a one-off meeting with the same group, or maybe a series that talks about the progress. If we have, it depends on what we have to update.
Yeah, because you said that we needed to get more information out to the stakeholders, and by this schedule that we have right now, it won't be for several months in between.
Yeah, and I think we need to think of other means. That's sort of a compact group, and I know they go back and report to their organizations and write it in newsletters, but I think we need to be creative too.
All right. Anybody else? All righty. Public speakers. Jen.
Jennifer Baker, CTA. I know that everyone's tired. This has taken a lot of time. I think Grant really hit the nail on the head as far as illustrating that there's a lot of communication that needs to happen. Because there's certainly among the stakeholder groups, there's not a dispute that there's a need to increase capacity. That's understood. Carrie really got it when it comes to the optics. What I would say is there are a number of unanswered questions that continue to be unanswered. The stakeholder groups have been asking for a long time. And as long as those continued unanswered questions remain out there, it doesn't allow a level of trust to move forward. And it also creates a sense of unease because there are a number of urgency issues that stakeholders are dealing with when it comes to your funding at the Capitol. And so there have been Capitol staff included in our meetings, and they've also repeated the need to have many of these questions answered. And so that is creating a level of tension. That coupled with the severely, there's a lot of misinformation at the Capitol on a number of levels, but your funding is at stake right now. And to the stakeholders, that's your number one priority. But the perception at the Capitol isn't that that's your number one priority. So it's created a level of tension. And so as long as we can work to understand and communicate the issues the way they need to be communicated to stakeholders, as well as to members and to folks at the Capitol, I think that's going to allow this conversation to move forward. What I would encourage you to do is I would like to invite you to come and attend a retirement coalition meeting so that you can hear directly from the stakeholder groups and the level of complexity of some of the issues. I know we've invited a few of you, but we would love to be able to coordinate a special meeting so you could hear. It is a different perspective. You're going to do what you need to do at the end of the day, but you also need to understand that we will also have to deal with optic issues and come to your aid should that be the case. So we're in this together. We just want to make sure that if we're going to help to do some political work and lifting on this, we want to make sure that we're in it together.
Jennifer, get us a list of the outstanding questions. We'll begin working on them and get those answers for you.
Staff have written them down.
No, get them to me as board chair.
And
we'll get them worked
work on
out.
coordinating a conversation for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. All righty, anybody else on this item? All righty, thanks. Moving on. Grant, Giselle, Lisa,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right, I'm going to do the
Or maybe Grant, maybe you shouldn't have moved for